I am Dialogies and welcome to Book 101. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He is the author of Seeds of War, no other than Mr. João Silva.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, Mr. Silva, and welcome back.
It's great to be back. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, and can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm João Silva. I'm a writer from Portugal, currently living in the UK, and I am the author of Seeds of War, which is a gritty epic fantasy book, the start of a new series called The Smokesmiths. And I've just recently submitted the book to the SPFBO, which is the self-publishing fantasy blog off. And yeah, it's been very exciting so far.
Yes, so what can you say about the first day of your book, Seeds of War?
It's been very interesting so far. So I think I published the book about 10 days ago. Sorry, 20 days ago. So we're basically uh, a little bit more than 2 weeks into the book being published, and the reception has been really phenomenal. I mean, I don't think I anticipated this many people and just so many readers reaching out and saying that they like the book. They think the cover is great, and just the content of the book in general is it's been really phenomenal. And yeah, I'm really excited for whatever the future can bring.
Yes, and every time I saw on my Twitter feeds, your book is on the top five list for their reading list for the month. Oh wow! Imagine Seeds of War. So, can we do a recap of what is all the book is all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's essentially a multi-point of view story. So instead of focusing on just one character going through their journey, it basically focuses on three of them. And there's not necessarily heroes to follow and to like. I think all three characters have different degrees of morality in them. They're not necessarily good people, not necessarily people that I would like to have a coffee with, but they are, I would hope, interesting to follow. And they essentially go through their journey just trying to do the best that they can to survive in a world that's full of very devastating smoke magic, a bunch of alien looking creatures that are super dangerous. And essentially, it's a world where people do whatever they can to survive. So, political machinations, uh, just alliances to topple one another. It's just it's a very harsh world to live in. But these characters are they're doing what they can.
Yes, so according to Amazon, they categorize your book as a dark fantasy horror, epic fantasy, and epic fantasy in book. What do you think why they categorize your book like that?
I think the fact that it's dark fantasy. I never really set out to write a dark fantasy book, or like how many people say grim dark fantasy. I think it just came out generally and organically that way, for the most part, because I do feel like characters who are not necessarily goody goodies tend to be a lot more interesting to follow for me as a reader. And I didn't really want to write characters who were good people because they're more predictable. You know that they're always going to do the right thing. You know they're always going to take the right steps and protect the people they should be protecting. And and to me that's less interesting. So I basically took a bit of a risk because not everybody likes flawed characters to follow. Not everybody likes characters who are unlikable or characters who are not someone you should be cheering for. So I took a little bit of a risk with that, but um, that's what I think a lot of people would consider the book dark or grim dark because the world is pretty ruthless and brutal. um, and there's some darkness going on, and even the characters have their own shades of darkness and their own past demons and kind of traumas that they're still dealing with, even in their adult lives. And I think it's very it can be dark. I personally don't think it's that dark, and the reception that I've had from readers has been that the book is dark. Other people say it's not that dark. Other people say it's very brutal and very dark. So I think each and every one of us who's a fantasy fan has their own spectrum of what they consider to be dark or not dark. And I think some people will say the book is not dark at all, and others would say it's extremely dark or it's very dark. So I think that's why I don't really like classifying the book as grim dark or dark fantasy. I just say it's an epic fantasy because I feel like it's more accurate, and it's giving the reader the chance to basically make up their own minds in terms of what they think the book is like. Is it dark fantasy? Is it not that dark? It's up to you. I really leave it up to the readers. But I mean, I think the fact that Amazon is listing it as dark fantasy, I think it because it leans a little bit more on that side, on that darkness side, and I think it's less more about sword and sorcery, and it's a little bit less about heroes versus villains and good versus evil, and I think it's more about people versus people. And I think people are all flawed. There's no, there's very few people in our world who are not flawed people and people who make mistakes and things like that. So I think that's why Amazon is categorizing the book as dark fantasy. In terms of epic fantasy, I think that's basically what the book is about. It's about a very wide cast of characters, a very diverse world with different cities and different countries and different biomes, different creatures. There's magic, and it's kind of a sprawling world that feels hopefully lived in and something that the characters are still discovering. And it's not confined to just one city or one place or one country. It takes place in a multitude of regions and a multitude of just ecosystems in general. So I think that's why it's considered epic fantasy. There's also battles. There's a lot of battle scenes and action sequences. So I think people who like epic fantasy would have no doubt considering it an epic fantasy book for sure.
Very well said, Mr. Silva. And according to James Jones, great stuff. How great it is, the Seeds of War.
Yeah, that's very nice. Like, I really appreciate the reviews.
So amazing. According to Jennifer, good, solid start to what looks like a very cool series. Seeds of War will be a series or a trilogy.
So I'm not sure yet. So I have plans for at least a trilogy. So I have, the first book is out, the second book is already being worked on, and I know for a fact that there will be a third book for sure. But I'm just not sure at the moment if the story will end on book three or if I will still have more story to tell after that. And if I do find that not all the plot lines have been resolved, or if I feel like there's still story to tell, then I will for sure bite more books in the series. But at the moment, it's a little hard to predict because I'm really not sure how the third book is going to end because I haven't started writing it yet.
Okay, so let's talk about your second book. What is all about?
The second book is actually just a continuation of the story. It's for people who have read Seeds of War, it's it's just a continuation of some of the war and the kind of the plot lines that we had opened in the first book. I really don't want to spoil because I think it's still in the very early days of the book being written. But I think one thing I can promise for whoever is listening that he's already a reader of Seeds of War. I think in the second book it's going to start with more of a bang. I think it's going to be less of a slow starting book. I really wanted to with Seeds of War. I really wanted it to be a book that takes its time to build up and ends on a high note. So I think for people we don't really mind the books being relatively slow in the beginning. I think I think that's what Seeds of War is, because I'm really taking my time with setting out the world and building up the characters and basically setting everything up to have a satisfying ending. And I think in the second book, because the readers already know the characters and they already know the world and they already know how things work, and relatively speaking, I think I can just get to the action a little bit more quickly. And I think that's what I did on the first draft, and that's where I'm going to try to preserve for the final instances of the book. I really want it to be, I want the beginning to have a bite. I want the reader to really feel the beginning of the book, and then hopefully that it's going to continue to stay on a very high pace throughout, and it's going to end even in a more epic note that Seeds of War did.
What would be the title of your second book, Mr. João?
So the title is not confirmed yet, but the tentative title that I have at the moment is called Thorns of War.
Wow, sounds interesting. So
Thank you.
these Seeds of War and Seeds of Thorns supposed to be will be standalone or a prerequisite that you need to read the first book.
No, this will be definitely be the continuation of the first book. So I think for people who maybe pick up Thorns of War, which will be the second book, I think it's definitely necessary to read the first one. I would say it's definitely in a contained series, and I think they would, if they pick up Thorns of War without reading the first one, I think they would miss out on a lot of very interesting plot lines and character development. So I think it's definitely much recommended to start with Seeds of War.
Yes, indeed. So, you told me last time that there will be a prequel of Seeds of War.
Yeah, that's correct. So that's actually going to be out before the second book. It's going to be called Ruins of Smoke, and I'm expecting it to have just a little bit less than 100 pages. And if my publishing schedule allows me, and if there's no unpredictabilities in the meantime, I'm expecting the book to be out by the end of the summer, maybe like early autumn. Um, yeah, and it's going to be called Ruins of Smoke.
So, what behind the title of Ruins of Smoke?
I think it's just to play with some of the things that happen in the book. I think obviously the name of the main series is the Smokesmiths, and the name the Smokesmiths comes from the magic system in the story, which is people who are able to inhale smoke and sort of able to perform magical abilities by doing that, by using the smoke. And so I think the smoke is just definitely a theme in the story as well, and it's going to be more evident in later books in the series, and it's something I want to showcase, just the full potential of the magic system. And that's something that when people read the prequel, it's going to be very, very evident that the prequel will really show just how much the Smokesmiths can do, and just exactly how powerful they can be if they know what they're doing with their powers. So but it's also the ruins, right? So it's the implication that even though the Smokesmiths are powerful, and the even though the smoke is something that they can tap into to become powerful beings and conduct magic, there's still the implication of ruins, of something that's happening that's not necessarily a good thing. And I think I'll leave it at that, because otherwise I'm just going to be delving a bit more into spoiler territory.
Yes. So, how did you crafted it? Ruins of Smoke.
Yeah, so it's just a building out characters that are completely different from the ones that are in Seeds of War, because the book is set about just a few thousand years before the events of Seeds of War. But it's very important. Those events are very important um, for the story of Seeds of War, for the history of the book and the lore behind Smokesmiths and the lore behind the way that the characters in Seeds of War perceive uh, the world that they live in. And it's an historical day. It's basically set in one city during the course of one evening, and it has four characters, and basically the story is divided by uh, the point of view of these four characters who are doing different things at the time, and essentially they're dealing with what is a threat to their livelihoods and to the way that they live their life. And basically, the story is about them dealing with this threat, and essentially, do they succeed? Do they not succeed? Do they fail? And how do they fight this threat? And basically, it's a kind of a way of showcasing their powers and essentially showcasing their abilities. And but I also want the story to have some emotional impact on the reader, which is a little hard to do in novellas because novellas tend to be much shorter than regular books, which means it's a bit harder to get the reader to feel invested in the characters when they spend so little time with them. So I'm really hoping that I can really ramp up the emotional connect of the book, and even if the reader spends only like 20 to 30 pages on each of the four storylines, I'm really hoping that they can feel for the characters and they can feel what the characters are feeling, and just really understand their point of views. And so that's kind of part of it, is making sure that even though it's a small story with a lot of points of views, that the reader will connect to them essentially.
Yes, sounds interesting, Mr. Silva. But before we go on, I want to shout out to the people listening to my top 10 countries that, according to my analytics, in Zambia, I'm number 26 on Apple's chart. Rwanda at number 42, Tanzania at number 45, and India at number 86, Algeria at number 60, Cameroon at number 71, United Arab Emirates at 116, Georgia at 214, and Jordan at 229. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast, because this podcast is created to empower writers all over the world like Mr. João Silva. So, Mr. Silva, what is the best highlight of Ruins of Smoke?
I'm hoping that the end of the book is going to be the most impactful one. Um, I always try to do I always try to structure the book in a way that it builds up to something at the end. And I think in a way that's my way of rewarding the reader for sticking with me for the entire book. And essentially I really want to bring in the epicness, and really want to create some epic scenes that the reader will be like, wow. And so hopefully, if I'm doing my job right, and if I'm doing everything I should be doing and according to my plans, I hope that the end of the book is going to be very epic, and it's going to be the most impactful part that's going to leave a very, very good and lasting impression on the reader.
Is this will be the pattern that every time you will publish the novel, you're gonna do a prequel?
Not necessarily. I think the so this prequel, Ruins of Smoke, will operate as a prequel story for the entire series, whether if it's three books or four books or five books or maybe even more. Um, this will be the prequel that precedes them all. This is going to be kind of the foundation of the story that is the Smokesmiths. And I might do other prequels in the future because I think there's a lot of hints to the history of the book, and especially with some of the characters that are in Seeds of War, I think they have very interesting backstories that I would like to actually spend some time to write. So I think even if I don't end up writing books beyond the first three, even if I end the Smokes and It's as just a trilogy, I think there will definitely be um, just basically other spin-off books or more prequel books that just are talking about what happens previous to Seeds of War. Um, or maybe I'll just write another set of books that's happening after Seeds of War and the after the events of Seeds of War.
Yes, very well said, Mr. Silva. As an indie author, what are your inspiring, or for those aspiring writers out there who want to publish their story?
I think there's a lot to be said, to be honest. I think it's very there's multiple sides to it. There's the writing side and there's the publishing side, and there's the the side with has to do with more with the community. And I think for anyone who's looking to publish their book, especially as an indie author, I think all of these three aspects, they need to be given the same amount of importance. I think obviously the writing side is the one that comes first, right? I think writers need to really continue to hone their craft and really continue to sharpen their tools and their toolbox. Essentially, what I mean is basically grow as a writer, like challenge yourself, try different ways of writing. For example, if you're not really sure how to write on first person or third person because you've always done it the other way around, try different ways of writing it. Experiment with past tense and present tense, for example. Do things that are difficult to you so that you can practice them and get better at it. And I think this is something that goes not just for beginning writers, but for pretty much everyone. I would imagine that even masters of the craft, like very famous and very well-renowned authors, they will still benefit from doing this because it's something that if writing is a craft and a skill, so if you don't practice enough, if you don't challenge yourself enough, then you're going to get stagnant. Your skills are not going to evolve, and yeah, you may never get to the specific level that you want to be at. And in terms of the publishing side of things, I think it's very important to do a lot of research before you jump into self-publishing, because it's very easy to just publish a book on Amazon or one of the other platforms and just leave it there and say, okay, the book is published. I'm a self-published author now. But then for people like me who want to do something a bit more serious with their writing, and for me, like, it's not my career, but I would love for writing to be my career, my only career. And I would love to become a full-time author at some point. So if that's your goal, or if you take writing seriously, and if you should also take publishing seriously. And what I mean by that is do a lot of research, spend a lot of time online figuring out some of the best and worst ways of going about things, which platforms are better for what genres, research what kind of books do better in certain platforms, and how to do marketing, how to do publishing, what are the usual costs of doing things, and how to hire artists, how to hire editors. Basically, do as much research as you can possibly do before you jump in, and only jump into self-publishing once you're very confident that you know what you're doing. Because I think a lot of the times with authors who are just coming into self-publishing for the first time, their idea is, I'm just going to self-publish my book and then I'll figure out the rest. But I think sometimes this is a mistake, because if that's your approach, then you're not giving yourself your best shot. You're basically um, not allowing your book to shine from the beginning when it should shine from the beginning. So and I think it's very important to do all the prior research. And in terms of community, I think it's also very important to find a community of your niche, and the writers and reviewers, and just other people who are interested in the same things as you are, because communities serve to help people, to kind of carry people over. And I think social media is a big part of it. Discord servers are a big part of it. And if you are a positive uh, person in the community, if people see you be positive and spread positivity, then when the time comes for you to have your book published, you would be surprised how much support you get back from them. So it's not being positive just for the sake of people being positive towards you as well. It's about just being authentic and giving to people with no expectations. And then because you're doing that, people will actually be interested in you and they would be interested in helping you out. And so I think these three things are what I would say the three most important things. So just to summarize, it would be keep practicing and keep evolving as a writer, keep honing your craft, do research in terms of publishing and self-publishing, and start building your community as early as possible.
Yes, very well said, Mr. Silva. So, what do you think are good characteristics of a good novel?
For me personally, I think it varies a lot. I think each reader will have their own preferences, but for me, I think it's the probably the most important thing is to be balanced. And obviously, my concept of balance is going to be very different from other readers' concept of balance. But for me, when I say balance, what I mean is a story that is in equal measure good in terms of character development, plot setup, world building, and just kind of how it all comes together in terms of pacing and the prose. So for me, like none of these things should be stronger than the other by a mile. I think they should all be very balanced and they should all be very strong at the same time. And I think it's very hard to achieve this. Um, and obviously, it varies. Some people will forgive anything bad in a book if the characters are good because they're very character driven readers. And other readers will be excusing bad characters and they would excuse a kind of a shabby world building if the plot is very engaging and very interesting, if it's a page turner. And others will look at the world and they don't really care about what happens in the world. They don't really care about the characters as long as the world is very detailed and it's very rich in details. So I think this will really depend on the preferences of each one of us. But for me, like actually, like I don't think I lean towards any of the so character, plot, or world. For me, I think I really like a balance of all three. So I think some of my favorite books uh, are very balanced in this sense. So like people tend to say that Joe Abercrombie, who's one of my favorite writers, they say he's a very character-driven writer, and he just really focuses on the characters. And I agree with that. But if you read his books, he also really puts a lot of detail and attention in plot lines, and he really cares about how the plot lines are resolved and how the storylines come to a satisfying ending. And his strong suit is not world building, but the worlds he builds are so intricate and so drawing so much from our world that it makes it engaging. So the way he's able to craft a completely mischievous political system in their worlds, um, which is very reminiscent of our world and the way our politics works. And I think it's really fascinating when authors are able to draw inspiration from the real world to craft a world that feels so real and so feasible. And so I think even though I would say Joe Abercrombie is mostly a character driven writer, I think he's also very balanced. I think he's also very good at plot and world. And I think I could say the same for Brandon Sanderson, for example. People say he's the magic system guy, and he's the one that writes all the cool magic systems, and he crafted his entire alien universe for the characters with multiple planets and things like that, very intricately detailed. But at the same time, he also has very cool plot twists, and he also has very interesting plot lines all converging together and taking place at the same time, while also doing very good and solid character development. Some of his characters are very interesting in terms of the mental health representation, for example. And I think that's what really makes writers stand apart from one another is that they don't really just focus on one thing. They really try to balance out their stories and they really pay attention to all aspects of the book.
Yes, very well said, Mr. Silva. But before we go on, I'm inviting you to listen to my other podcast, Food 101, on our third season with Chef Alessandro, one of the executive chef in one of the five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. So please do listen. Food 101. Plus one more. I have a upcoming new podcast. It's all about how to create laughter, people. It's Comedy 101 with Mr. Mike Lucas, one of the best comedian of all time. So please do listen this coming June, Comedy 101. So Mr. Silva, if you describe Seeds of War in five adjectives, what are they?
I would say the five adjectives. That's a hard one. Maybe epic would be one of them. Uh, Gritty would be the second. Um, Hopefully original, uh, unique, and also familiar at the same time. So I think I'm going to go with those five: epic, gritty, unique, original, and familiar.
And soon to be a timeless. Ah.
I hope so.
So do you think? So, Mr. Silva, please invite our listeners to buy your book and your upcoming novella.
Yeah, that would be great if they did, because Seeds of War is an adult epic fantasy. So if you like epic fantasy books with a bit of a gritty feel to it, and with characters who are not necessarily good people, but they're very interesting to follow. If you like unique magic systems with a very interesting cost to the user, if you like alien creatures or a world building that's not necessarily your typical medieval fantasy world building, I think Seeds of War might be for you. And it's not the slow burn, but it's also not a complete high paced book. I think it's a book that takes its time to build up, but then it ends on a very epic note. And in terms of Ruins of Smoke, it's just going to be action packed, and it's going to be very action driven, and but at the same time it's going to do a lot of the legwork in terms of building the lore and building the history of the world that Seeds of War takes place. So I think it's going to be a good starting point for whoever is interested in the series, but also you can also very well read it after Seeds of War. So yeah, be sure to check it out.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Silva because the book is phenomenal and amazing. Look the
Thank you.
cover. Look the cover. It's something else, people. As they said, don't judge the book by its content. Judge both the cover and the content. Okay, people. So, Mr. Silva, thank you for your time. What will be the date of the publication for your Ruins of Smoke?
Unfortunately, I don't have a publication date yet. It really still depends on how the publishing journey works, and things like getting the cover and getting the book back from my editor. But I'm hoping it's going to be sometime in late August or September. But this is with the caveat that that's not ready yet. So I need to. I really don't want to promise anything specific at this moment.
Yes, and can you please come back and let's talk about Ruins of Smoke furthermore?
Yeah, and absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Silva, thank you for your time.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. This is very nice.
Maricon people, see you soon.